Hello there everyone. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this Wirework Kumihimo braid where I've then added beads in to embellish it afterwards, and mine looks like this. So for the braid itself I've used two different colours of wire here, so silver and copper. You can obviously use one if you want to, and then I've just gone around afterwards with adding in my beads there along the side to give it that extra pop of colour as well. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need, and I've got two different gauges of regular round wire here that we'll be making the braid with, and the one gauge is two different colours that I'm working with as well. Now you don't have to do that, you can just work with one colour, but this is the 0.6 where I have one in copper wire and then I have one in a silver coated copper wire here because I want that contrast between the two metals. And then the other wire I have is a 0.4 mil. We'll be using this afterwards to add in our beads. And as for the beads, I'm just working with some very tiny, small blue coated hematite here, regular rounds. I thought that would give a really nice colour contrast to the metals that I'm working with. And then we'll need our findings, so extender chain, lost or claw clasp, and our jump rings as well. And then to finish off the braid at the end, I'm using some ribbon ends here. These ones are 8mm in the width, so they fit perfectly. And the final thing we need, of course, is our Kumihimo disc as well, and this is a regular round Kumihimo disc, so we need one of those as well. So let's get all the materials together and let's get started. So the lengths of wire that we'll need is 16 lengths in total of about 50 centimeters each. So if you want to use all the same colour of wire, you can just use 16 lengths in total here. Now if you want to do the same as me, where you use two different colours of your wire, what you'll need is 8 lengths of one colour and then 8 lengths of the other one. But that's obviously completely up to you. So then what I've done is taken all my lengths here and just put them together at the end, and then I just took one of my lengths, leave a bit of a tail here left on all of them, a bit of space because we need that to hold on to, but I just took one of my lengths and the equivalent length out and wrapped the whole thing around all of them here. So that's what I've done here. I've got a little wrap. This is to hold them all together here. We're going to attach it to the disc, but then this is going to go down through the disc in the middle, and then we're going to hold on to this excess, the tail here on the other side, to obviously make sure we don't slip our wire through that wrap because it can still pull through. But then we need to distribute these wires on the disc itself. So this is then how I've added all my wires here onto my disc. So in this setup, so what I've done is I've just focused on the dots around the disc here, so not the numbers, and then I've taken 2 lengths of wire per slot that I'm doing because that's the effect that I want to achieve. So what I've done is around the top dot I put 2 copper wires in each slot, and then around the bottom one here I put 2 silver wires in each slot there. On the side, the top ones on the side, I put my 2 silver wires down on the top side of the dot there, and on the bottom side of the dot on both sides I put 2 copper wires through. So this is how I'm going to set up my wires to achieve the look that I want. And then like I said, I have the rest of my tails and my wires coming out through the back of the disc, and I'm going to kind of use this as a handle to hold on to, especially right at the beginning, because like I said, if you just pull your wire here you can still pull it through that wrap that you did. It was just to hold them together. So you want to be careful and keep well hold of that tail on the bottom, so that handle. It's just right at the beginning it's going to be a bit loose, but it's just until we get some braiding done or some wrapping done here, crossing over the disc. Then it's like making the same braid as doing with cord, but the difference is we're working with wire, so it's a little bit different. So you just got to be aware of that. It's working with the wire here, it's quite different than working with the cord. We have to be a bit more aware of what we're doing and how we're placing the wire. But it's the exact same technique of the actual braid itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm keeping hold of that handle down below. Make sure you got well hold of all the wires, mainly here at the beginning so they don't slip through. So I'm going to take my top right ones first. Remember we have the 2 lengths of wire in each slot. Bring that downwards over to the opposite side, so my right one goes over towards my left and below the pair on the side here, just like that. Change hands. Now I take the top left one, bring that up, out to the side, so the opposite side of where you're taking it from, so it goes from the left over to the right, and then down below your side pairs again. Now chances are the first go around or 2 that you make aren't going to be the neatest, but until we get proper going with the braid, it's going to get easier to get into the proper rhythm. So we just need to get going first and basically get our wires safely in place so they're not going to move around that much, and then they'll find a natural way as well more. So we'll then take my bottom right one, bring that up over to the opposite side of the disc. So from the right side over towards the left, now to the top of that left pair around the disc. The bottom left one goes over to the right side and over to the top of that. So always think of opposites. From the right side it goes towards the left, and the left side goes towards the right. From the top it goes towards the bottom, and from the bottom it goes towards the top of the side. So that's a way of trying to remember. Now to completely go around, we need to then take the side ones and deal with them. So if you then focus on the middle two there, the ones that are right around the dot, I take the one that's just above the dot, bring it down, stay on the same side as it's coming from, so it's coming from the left side, go down to the left side of the bottom dot. Then we take the bottom one, the left pair here, and then bring that upwards towards the top. Stay on the left side of that top dot on the disc. And then on the side here I'm going to bring these two in, because you can see we now have a big gap there. We need to just bring these two in towards that dot, closer. So just both move inwards one slot, like that. On the other side we need to do the same, so the top one from the side comes up and then downwards towards the bottom. So on the right side of that bottom dot, that's left to be filled out, and then the bottom one on the right side goes upwards and stays on the right side of that, just like that. And again, these two need to come in and be right next to the dot, but stay on the same side as you took them. There we go, that's our first go around. And this is basically the step that we want to keep repeating now. Now, like I said, the first few go-arounds are probably not going to be that neat, but once we get into the place where the wire's finding the place properly, then you also want to start paying attention to how the wires are lying. Because what I want to achieve is actually my wires constantly lying next to each other, so weaving neatly instead of crossing over each other. So that means the wires that are in the same slot. So that means going to the next round, I'm going to take my two wires here from that top right slot, starting over again just like I just did, but now because they're kind of finding their place more, as I bring them over, if you look right down where they're coming out, you'll be able to see that they're lying next to each other. So the one that's further towards the inside, I want that to stay there. So that means I want to make sure I smooth them down as I'm pulling them around to go to the other side, below the pair on the side there as well. And then, same principle with every other pair of wires that you do. Release them, just smooth them down, make sure you bring them around so they stay lying next to each other instead of crossing over. Of course, if that's what you want, that's fine, but I prefer to have them lying next to each other to give that nice neat look, like that. Taking the bottom ones, bring them over, make sure they stay lying next to each other rather than crossing over. So repeating the exact same steps now, slowly getting into a rhythm where the wires are finding their way as well. It's going to be more natural and easier to keep them separated. On the side, the top one of the side ones that are right next to the dot, make sure they lie flat next to each other instead of crossing over, comes downwards. And I also like to, as I go, kind of smooth my wires out so they don't have any bends or kinks in them. Obviously they'll get that where you're working with them out here as you're working with them, but just make sure as the wires get further in here, this area, that you want to make sure it's nice and smooth. The bottom one from the side, smooth it out. Make sure your wires lie next to each other. And then bring it up. And then bring the side ones further in towards right next to the dot there. The same thing on this side. The top one nice and flat, bring it down, and then the bottom one also nice and flat, and bring it up, and then bring the two further into the side, right next to the dot. And then that's your second go around. And then this is all you want to keep doing really, so keep repeating this step over and over again, and then your braid will build on the back here. So now what we have, we've gone around twice, so the wire's a little bit more positioned in place. So you don't have to hold on as tightly to the back now, because the actual braid itself is going to help them keep the wires in place. But you just need to make sure that you have a little section done here before you lose your grip too much, because obviously you still don't want to have the risk of pulling the wires through, so just be careful with that. When you're moving your wires, don't pull them too tight, because they might come out through there in the middle, and you don't want to risk that if you can help it. But just continue doing this, remembering that you're working with wires, so it's a bit different. Be gentle with it, make sure the wires lie how you want them to as you're moving them, and then straighten out any kinks and bends along the way. So keep doing this until you used up all your lengths. So now that I've gotten quite a bit further here and I'm running out of my wires, you can see I don't have that much left, I just want to show you again that once you get into the rhythm here and the wires find their place, it does get much easier. So I'm going to take my top right one, just like the other times, and you just want to make sure, like I said, always have a look at your wires, where they're coming out, and you'll find kind of your way of doing it, where it's going to be more natural, and keep the wires lying flat next to each other. Find out how to kind of maneuver your wires about. Keep with the exact same technique here, the go-arounds that I showed you before. And as you can see, I'm smoothing out my wire every time I'm moving it. I'm constantly keeping an eye on the fact that they're lying flat. Bring that down. And I tend to hold on to my piece underneath more than I do on the disc when I'm making wire Kumihimo here, because the braid itself is so sturdy, and because you're pulling, I'm putting quite a bit of tension in when I'm pulling my wires here to make sure they get in the right position and lie in the right way. And you have the best leverage if you hold on to your braid instead of your disc. And the other side here, just double check, bring it in, and then the other one here, and bring that up. And this one is just crossed over a little bit, so I just change position, and then I bring them down right next to my dot there on the side. So this is what you want to do. You get kind of your own rhythm when you start doing this, and you just want to make sure you have quite a bit of tension when you're maneuvering your wires about as well. So when you then used up all your wire here, then what we can do is just take this off the board. Because it's wire we're working with, you can just take it off and leave the wire. You don't have to worry about the braid coming undone, because the wire will just stay in place like that. Take the disc away, and then here we then have the braid. So this is what it then looks like. So you have, in my case, because I'm using the two different colours, the way I placed it on the disc, we have the silver wire running down through the middle of the braid, and then the copper wire is kind of forming these borders on the outside. So this is one side, the other side looks like this. So the two sides are slightly different, so you can say there's kind of a front and a back, but they're both nice in their own ways, so you can really choose whichever one that you prefer. So as you can see, once you get really into the braid and find your rhythm, you can get it to look really nice and uniform there. So then the other end where we started out, I just want to show you that, how mine looks. So as you can see, I have a bit of not very uniform area down here. It starts out a bit wide, like I said. You just want to leave yourself a little bit of space down here, give a chance to get into the rhythm of it, and find your wires basically find their way as well. So it's a bit wider here, and then you can see then I start finding my way with the wires, and it stays nice and uniform, but keeping an even tension as well. So just make sure you give yourself that little space. You can obviously use this if you want, but if yours is a little bit uneven, you have this little area, you can cut that off. So now that we have our braid ready here, what we want to do is clean up the ends, because obviously we have all this excess wire where we couldn't braid anymore. So what I'm going to do is just take a pair of my flush cutters here, And then I want to just start cutting off the excess wire just right where my braid ends. So you just take a bit at a time, 1 or 2 lengths of wire at a time, then cut them down, go across. Try and go across at a straight line if you can, all the way. And then we'll get a nice and neat finish here that we can then finish off with our ribbon ends at the end. I just want to get rid of these so we can then go to the next step as well. And then obviously you want to also cut your bracelet down to the length that you need. So I've got rid of all these ends now. That's where I finished my braid. So what we need to do now is measure the length. So measure however long you want your bracelet to be, minus obviously what the clasp is going to take up, so account for that. And then you want to do the same, just cut through wherever that length is, cut through the exact same way to get a straight line across. So then to start adding in our beads, what we'll need is the length of a 0.4mm wire here, and I've just taken about 80 centimeters. That'll be more than enough, but also give us sufficient to work with. So we then need to take our length of braid here that we already cut ready, and then we need to just attach this 0.4mm wire first of all. So I'm going to go towards one end here, and then what you'll find is when you look on your braid that along the side, so the border colour there, you'll have little gaps that you can just see, and that'll fit the 0.4mm wire through there perfectly. So what I'm going to do is go through one of these gaps towards the end of my braid, not the very last one because that's where the braid is kind of open from cutting it off, the end wires. So just go through that. And then I want to pull a decent length through here, kind of actually try and find the middle. You can put both ends together, just so we roughly have the same length on both sides. So something like that. Then I'm going to leave it there, and then what I want to do is I went down from one side, then my wire's coming out of the back, then I want to go through the other side, so the wire's just kind of coming across the back there. It's not too crucial here, right at the end, because the end part of the braid here is going to be covered by the ribbon end. This is just to secure it in place. So just pull it down through. So there we go. You can always then take some pliers or just your nail and press that down into the braid just like that. So now we have a wire, 0.4mm wire attached here, and we're ready to work up one side at a time attaching in the beads. So I'm just going to start on one of my sides here. I'm just going to get the other wire out of the way, and then this one that I'm working with first, I'm just going to work with that one first. Doesn't really matter because we're obviously doing both sides. What I then want to do is, a little tip can be, because you don't necessarily want to start adding in your beads straight away, because you don't want to end up having a bead towards the end of your braid, and then when you go to put on your ribbon ends and clamp down, the bead is actually going to be inside the ribbon end, so you want to avoid that. So it's helpful just to put on your ribbon end to see how far down it's going to go. So I can see if I add a bead first, it'll conflict a little bit. So I just want to go up one more kind of loop along the side there. And what I do is to kind of follow the braid pattern, and to make sure that this wire also blends in, is coming up through that gap on the side. What I'm going to do is go around from the top to the back, and then on to the next gap, and then come up through that from behind the braid. Because if you have a look on your actual braid, you can see that that's kind of how the sides go. They're coming up and then going under, up and under, and then there we've moved up one space, and we're perfect in position to then go on to the next one. But then this is here I want to start adding in my beads as well, so I'm going to get them ready. Like that, my tiny little ones there. And all we're going to be doing is then adding one bead at a time. I'm in position for my next one, adding a bead to my wire. You can let it drop down if you want. The same thing, coming through towards the top, go around the side and the back of the braid and up through the next gap. Always sticking out to the side here. We're never crossing back and forth across from one side to the other. While we're adding the beads now, that was just in the beginning to add in the wire itself. And then when you're pulling this down, you just want to maybe hold on to your bead and pull your wire nice and tight, so it's going to make sure the bead sits right there on the outside of the braid, so it doesn't end up on the front or the back. And we're coming up the next gap, pick up your next bead, and come up through from the bottom through the next gap there. Pull all the way through. Just position your bead how you want it to sit and keep hold of it while you then pull your wire nice and tight. And you can always then maneuver your bead in place if it doesn't sit quite right. There. So obviously you want to make sure they look nice and even. So this is all you keep doing basically. You can vary what you want to do with your beads. Obviously use different kinds of beads. You can do every other gap. If you use maybe some bigger beads, that would be nice, using every other gap instead of every one. But you just continue like this. When you're done all the way up the other end, you obviously want to start doing the same thing on the other side with this wire. Doing the exact same thing, come up from the front, around the back and the side, and go up through the next gap while you're then adding your beads along the way. So keep doing this all the way up to the other end. Remember to leave a little space up here before you then, so you have a little gap where you're going to add on your ribbon end without any beads on. So now that I've added my beads all the way up this side and then go to the other side as well and add it on there, I reach the same point on this end. So what you got to do now is just finish off your weaving wire here, the 0.4mm. So I'm just going to go through the next gap again with no bead on and just secure that in place. And you want to do the same thing on the other side, and then all you can do is bring it towards the side, and if you have a gap somewhere you can go through it. You just want to secure it extra. And then all you do is just find somewhere, cut it down, because it's nice and secure in place, and then you can just squeeze in the very end. Press it into the braid, but otherwise this is going to get hidden inside the ribbon end anyway, so that's why we don't have to worry about it being too neat. And finish off the other wire as well. Then all that's left to do is then finish off the ends. Once you then get rid of all your ends there of your wire, then all that's left to do is really finish off the ends with your ribbon ends like this, so it's going to make a nice and neat finish there. So what I'm going to do for that is, we already have the end nice and flat, so you can just squeeze it a bit, and that's going to fit in there just perfectly. And I have my ribbon end. I'm also going to get on my glue. I'm going to be using my E6000 for this because it's really nice and strong and it's going to last a long time. And then also it dries clear, so if a little bit spills out, it's not the end of the world. So get a little bit of glue, and then I put that on a toothpick. I want to get that into the ribbon end, up and down the sides. Just make sure you cover it. Don't get too much because it's just going to come spilling out, because obviously we need to fit the end of the braid in there as well. And I just like to do the glue here. It's just going to make it much more durable. I also put a little bit of glue right on the end of my braid, because then you get a really nice bond between the two pieces together. So just a bit to cover it like that. And then I'm going to take my ribbon end, place that over there. So I like to hold a piece in my hand and then take my fingers along the side of my ribbon end to hold it in place while I'm then squeezing it down. And then what I want to do is, I don't go in somewhere and just make a big squeeze all the way down so it's nice and tight. What I do is I start from one side and go back and forth and gently do little presses to get it closer and closer. And then when I'm almost there, I just take it out, just have a double check it there, see if I'm happy with how it sits, because when you're squeezing it down it can sometimes move a little bit. So I just want to double check before I completely make my final squeeze. So go in and do that, and then do that all the way around, back and forth. And then I also just go in on the sides and squeeze them down extra, so the gaps on the sides aren't too large. So there we go. It also has these teeth that kind of nestle into the braid nicely, but we have that glue in there that's going to make it really nice and extra secure. So do this to both your ends, and you have these loops on the ribbon ends where you attach your findings. So just go ahead and do that, and then all that's left to do is shape the bracelet. So I now finish off both my ends here, and I've got my extender chain and lost a claw clasp on as well. So all that's left to do, like I said, is bend it, shape it into the right shape. Now you can either, if you have something of the shape and size that you want it to be, you can just fold it around that. But otherwise, what you can just do is use your hands and fingers and just gently work it a bit at a time, put curves into it. So I like to start kind of from the middle and then put gentle curves in it. So don't go in somewhere and make a big bend, because that'll put it out of shape rather. Just do it gently, a bit at a time, work your way towards a shape. Now I personally prefer an oval shape rather than a round, as that tends to sit a bit better on the wrist, but it's completely up to you. As you can see, it's getting more and more curved. So just keep working it until you get to that right shape where your ends meet each other up there, so you can obviously use the clasp to close it. Nice and gentle curves, so it keeps a nice shape. So pretty much getting there, and you can use your clasp obviously to close it, and then there is your finished bracelet. You can just do any final tweaks if you want to on the shape, but then it looks like that. And then you have a really nice and striking look from the front, but still simple and elegant as well, because it's not too much. It's still a nice and delicate bracelet. So that's how you make this. So you make your half round Kumihimo braid with wire, and I've just made 2 different colours here obviously, and then you can embellish the braid itself with adding beads onto it afterwards. So that's what it can look like. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this wire Kumihimo bracelet with beads running along the inside of the braid, and it looks like this. So this is the effect that you get. You have your Kumihimo braid on the outside but with wire, and then your beads running on the inside of the bracelet, and then finished off nicely at the end there. So this is actually using a Kumihimo technique that's called the hollow braid. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching.